Hello, I'm Charles Hubble, your host and narrator for our podcast series, Deceived, the Moo Years. Deceived, the Moo Years is the true story of one young man's compelling, at times terrifying, former involvement with the martial arts cult Chung Moo Quan.
The following story you are about to hear is true. It took place between 1980 and 1996. Most of the names have been changed. There are other versions of the story. My name is Russell Johnson, and this one is mine.
Deceived, the Moo Years, Episode 6, Sacrifice. From the beginning of his return to Chung Moo Quan training, Russell was constantly questioned about how much he paid for his Trans Am. Instructors asked why he didn't sell that one, as they called it, and bring the money down to school so he could pay off his contract faster.
To get cash, students were urged to sell their cars and use up their savings. Students with few possessions were badgered with questions.
Did you have any stocks or bonds that you could sell? Did you have a grandparent or a relative with money that would be willing to finance your black belt program?
They wanted your money.
That's all they wanted, was your money.
The idea was, the faster you paid off your contract, the faster you could move up in rank. Russell's friend Ken, who was under the same pressure to sell his Trans Am, would drop out.
The pressure to get students to sell their cars was not uncommon. Cars were identified by the school as assets that could be sold and the money go towards Chung Moo Quan training. Even some of the instructors sold their cars to help pay for their lessons. When signing up new students, one of the questions I was required to ask during sideways conversation is, what kind of car did they drive?
The mind control in this organization has them believing that the quicker they pay it off, the more righteous or more direction they have within the organization, the more loyalty they have to Chung Moo Quan ideas. And so it behooves them to pay it off quickly, and therefore they generally drain their bank accounts quite rapidly.
Russell was asked to provide a list of his living expenses. This included his monthly car payment. They would ask him what he had done to deserve a car like that, telling him he hadn't earned it yet. He owed more on the Trans Am than he could sell it for.
Not only was I asked to provide a list of my monthly living expenses, I was also asked to provide a list of my family members and where they lived and what they did for a living.
Before returning to Chung Moo Quan, Russell could afford to make his monthly payments on the car. But now he faced a decision. His goal was to become a Chung Moo Quan instructor, but he loved his car. Eventually, Russell called the bank and explained he could no longer afford to make the payments. He was with his sister when the repo man came to get the car and remembers the sadness of that moment. As he watched them tow the car away, his sister began to cry. Giving up his Trans Am was a loyalty test to show the school that training meant more to him than any material thing. It would be the first of many loyalty tests to come.
I wanted the school to see that my training meant more to me than the car that I loved owning. But after it was over and my credit was ruined, my sacrifice meant nothing to them. There was like an invisible line of loyalty tests. For every one that I passed, 2 more would be added.
Another assistant gave Russell a rusted piece of shit old Mustang II, basically a Pinto with a plastic Mustang emblem, not a classic. The floorboards were completely rusted through. People laughed at it, since the suspension was completely worn out and, as he drove it, the car bounced up and down. One day, he gave Craig a ride to work, and, driving through a rain puddle, a tidal wave came up through the floor, soaking them both from head to toe. They laughed hard. Sometimes, you just have to laugh at yourself. The 3 weaknesses of an instructor. Russell was told that Master Kim said a Chung Moo Quan instructor had 3 weaknesses: women, alcohol, and gambling. He was told that women were faulted by design and that they had no minds. An instructor could lose his mind over a woman. They want control over the relationship and the man. Russell had a hard time with this thinking because he was raised by his mother, one of the most wonderful people he had ever known. One of the stories Keith liked to repeat was that, as part of Master Kim's training, Grandmaster Wang Po ordered him to sleep with 3,000 women. Not only was he to sleep with them, but get a picture with each one. The purpose of the story was to say Master Kim had a deeper understanding of women, which could be used to justify his non-feminist views taught at school. It was said that after Master Kim had slept with all these women, they either became nuns or committed suicide because they could not be with him. This was before digital cameras. Russell's thought was that the master's film development bill each month must have been huge. The second weakness was alcohol. Russell understood this because members of his own family struggled with alcoholism. The part he didn't understand was the idea that those studying Chung Moo Quan, people with some of the strongest minds in the world, could be susceptible to such a weakness. It seemed contradictory. As for gambling, he was not a game player and never gave it that much thought either way. Because all teachings came from Master Kim, he assumed that he must have these weaknesses.
We were told that our training developed the strongest minds and bodies, but we were also told that instructors in general had 3 weaknesses. I have known people in my life that had never trained in the Moo and never had any of them. I was raised by a single mom who loved and defended me. I had also been trained in the school with women that I had respected. This attitude towards women was a complete affront to how I was raised. I was being programmed, and the Moo's will was overtaking my own. It was rumored that Kim's trips to Vegas to invest cash birthday and Christmas gifts in our future involved a little drinking and gambling.
Black Belt Magazine. Russell read Black Belt Magazine religiously. He wanted to learn everything he could about martial arts and its history. After hearing of Master Kim's great accomplishments and knowing his school was a worldwide organization, he went to the library to do research. He could find nothing about it in any martial arts books. This was before the internet. He thought, if Chung Moo Quan was in all these different countries, there must be something written about it. He relied on Black Belt Magazine to keep him informed. Russell was told not to read Black Belt or any martial arts magazine because there was nothing that he could learn from them, and he was wasting money that could go toward his Chung Moo Quan training. The instructor went on to say that Black Belt Magazine had tried numerous times to get an interview with Master Kim, and even came to the school, but they were told to leave and never return. Chung Moo Quan was the only true martial arts, and the rest were inferior, his instructors explained, so there was nothing he could learn from them.
As a beginning student, I tried to research Chung Moo Quan, but this was before the internet and there was nothing available in the local library. All that was known at the time came from the Moo.
The telling of unbelievable stories was a way for instructors to judge how open the students were to suggestion and the Moo philosophies. Easily impressed is easily enslaved, stated one head national instructor. Russell would talk about these fantastic stories with his peers. They all wanted to believe they were true. This belief created a strong bond among them. They could not share these stories with their family or friends because they would think they were nuts. One night, a group of assistants sat around and repeated stories they heard, saying that people who were not part of the school would never believe them. From childhood, most are raised to believe in Santa Claus and a supreme being that will come to earth and save all mankind. Many of them believed they had found that person in Master Kim.
Former followers were told he had supernatural powers. Many believed it.
It was said that he had a lot of healing powers, that he could essentially heal anything.
They told us that when he was in a room, you could see aura, a halo around him.
I thought I was going to learn the secrets to life, to deeper meaning of life.
He had a third eye in his forehead.
That explained what?
That he could read your mind. His powers were phenomenal. They made him seem like a god to us.
There was a group of about 10 students at School C, including Russell, all around the same belt level, and they would train together for long periods of time. They also worked on projects assigned by the school, painting, building, whatever was needed. They formed intensely close bonds, very similar to that of the camaraderie of veterans.
One of the things that I enjoyed about the school was the people I met there. Regardless of everything that you're hearing, for the most part, they were good, honest, decent people that came from all walks of life and educational backgrounds. We were all caught up in the same pyramid scheme, just at different levels.
Cleaning school and watering its plants was done daily. The school was always spotless. The outside windows had to be washed frequently. While washing windows, Russell often noticed spit dripping down the pictures of Master Kim. He was told this was done by people jealous of Master Kim and Chung Moo Quan training.
The school was maintained by the students and for the most part was spotless. When I used to clean the spit off the windows, I thought it was done by nearby competing martial arts schools. Later, I'd come to believe that it was done by those who were once trained under Aiden.
The return of Aiden. One day, when Russell practiced a movement taught to him by Aiden, the instructor yelled out that it was not an official Chung Moo Quan movement. Russell had a hard time with this. The instructor was lower in rank than Aiden, so how could he tell Russell it was not a movement? A few days later, Jordan Bain came to the school and wanted to talk with Russell about Aiden. Jordan and Russell walked down to the pizza shop in the same strip mall where School C was. Jordan explained that Aiden was no longer a member of the school, that he lost his mind over a woman and left the school in the middle of the night. This was an affront to Master Kim. Aiden at TJ's. Russell believed that everything Aiden had known was taught to him by Master Kim. Hearing about Aiden's abrupt departure in the middle of the night, it seemed way more disrespectful toward Master Kim than when Russell had left, because Aiden knew Master Kim and turned his back on him. One night, at Tony Jarro's bar, Russell ran into Aiden. He had just moved back to Minnesota after being gone only a year or so. Russell walked up and spoke with Aiden, but he was very standoffish and asked if Russell was training in Chung Moo Quan. Russell said yes, he was now 4th section. Aiden replied, finally, with a smirk, "It took you long enough." Russell replied, "At least I didn't quit."
I remember that night. I even remember where Aiden was standing when I approached him. He was very standoffish, not the man that I had remembered. I wish he could have tried to talk to me then. He might have saved me from the life-threatening events yet to come. But at that point, I don't think he could. He had been gone only for a year, and that is not enough time to recover, process, and deprogram from what he had been through. I don't even know if he had come to the conclusion yet that Chung Moo Quan was a cult.
The next day, Russell went to school, reporting everything to Mason Holmes, who was very concerned. Russell heard Aiden was working as a bouncer at a local nightclub, so Russell tried to talk with him there, but Aiden ordered him away. Around the same time, Russell's older brother Roddy was working at a company with one of Aiden's students, who had quit after Aiden left. The former student told Russell's brother that he felt the whole thing was a cult. Russell's brother subsequently tried to warn him, but he had no proof, so Russell failed to listen. His brother, afraid of driving him farther into the group, quickly gave it up. Russell remembers thinking that the idea of the Moo being a cult was stupid. Everyone knows cults are religious groups. One day at school, Russell saw Keith Brown practicing sword form, sweating profusely and looking stressed. Keith told him that Aiden Gonzalez was in the coffee shop next door along with Dick, one of his former Chung Moo Quan students. Keith said that Aiden had come for Russell to get him out of school, and that Russell had a choice to make. Keith practiced hard and moved very well, but both knew he was no match for Aiden. At that time, Russell's loyalty was to Master Kim, so he did not go to the coffee shop to meet Aiden.
I came into the school and I felt a nervous energy from Keith that I could only describe as fear. By this time, I had been completely conditioned to respond to his every command. I remember him being particularly hard on me that day. I had never forgotten Aiden coming for me that day, and after I left, I would come for others.
After Aiden had moved to California, he began to train under Shaolin Master Cam Yuen again. Within a short period of time, he became Cam Yuen's top instructor. Aiden would return to Minnesota and open a school not far from School C, naming it Shaolin West Kung Fu. Instructors Matt Kemps and Mason Holmes asked Russell to check out the school and report back to them. Russell would drive by, counting the cars in the parking lot. When the school was closed, Russell would go and look in the windows. Chung Moo Quan was very concerned about what Aiden was doing. During the federal court trial, Aiden would testify that after he opened Shaolin West Kung Fu, he received a phone call from Master Kim threatening to kill him or send a national instructor to beat him up.
It was a weird feeling being out in the parking lot, counting cars and spying on Aiden and peeking into the windows at night. He was my first Chung Moo Quan instructor, and I still considered his skill level above all other instructors. How did this happen? How did things turn around so much? Why did I not see something was very wrong?
Camping trip. One summer, Russell went on a camping trip with the school to Leech Lake in northern Minnesota. Cabins had been rented for all of the Minnesota instructors, their families, and a select few assistants. It was one of a few times that Russell remembers seeing the school spend what he considered a lot of money. At a gas station, Russell remembers the long procession of moo cars lined up at a single gas pump. National instructor Jared was at the pump, filling each car one by one, and at the end, paying for the gas. On the way to Leech Lake, they rode in a large convoy of cars. The driver of the car Russell was in forgot to turn off his turn signal, and no one in his car noticed. At the next stop, the instructor who was following came up to their car. He was irate that the turn signal had been on. He gave them a mental correction for not paying attention. Russell remembers feeling that the instructor's reaction was a little overboard. Once they arrived at the lake, they stayed in cabins and fished. There was plenty of food. Late at night, after all the civilians had settled in, national instructors Jared and Jordan trained the black belts in the dark. It was a surreal experience. Things like this built community. On the way home from the trip, national instructor Jared happened to be following behind the instructor that had given the mental correction on the way up, who now, coincidentally, left his turn signal on. Jared pulled over the whole convoy and gave that same instructor a correction of his own. Russell found the whole thing very humorous. Originally, he was a little apprehensive about going on the camping trip. Keith had told him horror stories about a trip to the Chung Moo Quan farm in Naperville, Illinois. There, they played a game called Ben-Hur. The farm had a pond. Keith described the games in a fun and exciting way, but it sounded very much like a fraternity hazing, taken to the next level. One game involved Master sitting in a small boat. The goal was to swim up and touch the boat. Master shot the swimmers with a BB gun as they approached, and, if they got close enough, Master would beat them with a paddle. Keith told this story with great enthusiasm, but in the back of Russell's mind he thought, fuck that.
Next week, Undeceived, the Moo Years, Episode 7, falling further under the influence of the Moo. Deceived, the Moo Years is a production of Deja Moo, LLC. Recorded and produced by Alive and Social Podcast Network. Russell Johnson, producer and writer. Charles Hubble, host and narrator. David Bruskin, editor. Russ Meyer, co-writer and editor. Aaron Troe, sound producer. Brian Price, audio editor. Wyatt Sarber, sound engineering. Woon Tae Ryu is our advisor in South Korea. Authentic is our advertising representative. Deceived, the Moo Years is represented by Young Entertainment Law.